The doors of Trauma Bay 1 slammed open with a force that rattled the glass, and Dr. Marcus Hale looked up from his clipboard to see 6 men in tactical gear storming down his hospital corridor, boots pounding against white tile, rifles slung across their chests, faces streaked with dirt and blood that was not entirely their own. He dropped the clipboard. His voice cracked through the sterile air like a whip. "Who called the SEALs into my hospital?" No one answered. The soldiers kept moving, straight toward a woman standing quietly by the nurse's station, a woman Marcus had known for 6 years and thought he understood completely. She turned to face him, and what she said next would unravel everything he believed about the quiet, unassuming nurse who had worked beside him every single day. "If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet heroes hiding in plain sight, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Midnight Tales so you never miss a story like this one." Marcus Hale had spent 18 years inside the walls of Ashford General, a trauma surgeon who had seen war wounds, car wrecks, gunshot victims, and every kind of human suffering a body could survive. He prided himself on control. In his operating room, chaos became order the moment he picked up a scalpel. But nothing in 18 years had prepared him for the sight of a Navy SEAL team escorting a wounded operator through his emergency room doors, nor for the sight of Nurse Elena Vasquez stepping forward to meet them as though she had done this 100 times before. Elena had been hired at Ashford General 5 years earlier, arriving with a quiet resume, a soft voice, and hands that never trembled even in the worst emergencies. She kept to herself. She ate lunch alone in the break room, declined invitations to staff gatherings, and left work each evening without a word about her life outside those walls. The other nurses gossiped that she was private, maybe even cold. Marcus had never given it much thought. She was efficient, precise, and utterly reliable, and in a hospital where seconds decided lives, that was all that mattered to him. What none of them knew was that Elena Vasquez had once worn a different uniform. Before the scrubs, before the stethoscope, she had served 8 years as a combat medic attached to special operations units, patching up wounded men in the back of helicopters over deserts thousands of miles from home, in places where medevac was a luxury and improvisation was survival. She had held soldiers together with gauze and willpower when there was nothing else to hold them with. She had watched men die in her arms and men live because her hands refused to shake. When her enlistment ended, she came home carrying memories most people could not imagine, and she chose the quietest possible way to keep saving lives, an ordinary nursing job in an ordinary hospital, where nobody would ever ask her to explain the scars on her forearms or the calm she carried into chaos. The soldier on the stretcher that night was Staff Sergeant Cole Bennett, a man Elena had served with years earlier during a deployment that neither of them spoke about afterward. He had taken shrapnel to the abdomen during a training exercise gone wrong, and his team, refusing to trust an unfamiliar civilian hospital with his life, had made a call before they even reached the ambulance bay. They asked for her by name. Not for Ashford General. Not for Dr. Hale. For Elena. Because they remembered a medic who had once refused to let go of a dying man for 11 straight hours until a helicopter finally broke through enemy fire to reach them, and they believed, correctly, that if anyone could keep Cole alive in those first critical minutes, it was her. Marcus stood frozen as Elena knelt beside the stretcher, her hands moving with a speed and certainty he had never witnessed even from her, calling out vital signs and instructions in a voice that had shifted entirely, sharper now, commanding, a voice built for battlefields rather than hospital corridors. She was not asking permission. She was leading. And for the first time in his career, Marcus Hale, a man who had never once doubted his own authority in a trauma bay, found himself stepping back and following someone else's lead. He demanded an explanation later, after Cole had been stabilized and wheeled into surgery, after the soldiers had reluctantly stood down and allowed the hospital staff to work. He cornered Elena in the hallway outside the operating room, his frustration masking something closer to bewilderment. He asked her, plainly, who she really was. Elena did not raise her voice. She told him about the deployments, about the men she had lost, about the ones she had managed to save against impossible odds, about the friend on that stretcher who had once carried her out of a burning vehicle when she herself had been the one bleeding out. She told him she had never lied to him. She had simply never been asked the right question. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a mixture of shame and awe that he could not immediately untangle. He had spent 5 years working alongside a woman capable of extraordinary things, and he had never once wondered what silence she was carrying beneath her composure. He thought of his own assumptions, how quickly he had labeled her distant, how easily he had mistaken restraint for coldness. He realized, standing in that hallway, that some of the strongest people are the ones who never announce their strength, who simply show up and do the work while the rest of the world looks past them. Cole Bennett survived the surgery. Marcus performed the operation himself, but it was Elena's stabilization in those first critical minutes that had bought the time necessary to save him, a fact the surgical team would repeat quietly to one another for weeks afterward. When Cole woke up 2 days later, the first face he asked for was not the surgeon's. It was Elena's. She sat with him for over an hour, and for once, she let her guard down enough that a nearby nurse overheard her laughing, a sound none of them had heard from her before. In the weeks that followed, something in the hospital changed. Marcus began seeking Elena's input during trauma cases in a way he never had before, deferring to her instincts in moments of crisis, treating her not merely as a nurse but as the seasoned combat medic she had always been beneath the scrubs. The other staff began to look at her differently too, not with suspicion or curiosity, but with a quiet, growing respect. She remained private. She still ate her lunches alone, still left without much conversation. But now, when the hospital doors burst open with an emergency no one else could handle, more than one person in that building understood exactly why Elena Vasquez never once flinched. Marcus never forgot the lesson that night taught him, that the people who carry the heaviest burdens are often the ones who show it the least, and that real strength rarely announces itself with noise. It simply shows up, again and again, ready to save whoever needs saving, asking for nothing in return. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that everyday people are capable of extraordinary things, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who could use a reminder of quiet strength today. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If you have ever known someone like Elena, someone who carried more than they ever let on, someone whose strength only revealed itself when it truly mattered, please write their story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I would be honored to hear about the quiet heroes in your own life. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep believing in the extraordinary people hiding in ordinary places.